Hello and welcome to this lecture. So in this lecture we will implement that is our enemy position. So if you see here, we have something to implement that is adjust enemy position, and we have this check Mario X collision and check Mario Y collision. So let's try to implement that in this lecture. So firstly, let me just copy this, that is adjust enemy position, and just paste it down here, and let me just put a self, that is the current enemy here. So this function basically moves all the enemy along the x and y axis, and it also checks for the collision. So I'll say for enemy in self.enemy.group. so that means we have a group which has basically a list of enemy that can be cell, goombas or copas. So in that enemy group we'll just get that rect and yux. So there should be the movement in our enemy. So this means in the yux there should be change. So that means if you change this in the yux, that means there is a movement. So that means there is a change in the displacement of our enemy. So that should be with an enemy dot x velocity. So there should be the movement with this x velocity in this enemy, that is it is changing its position with this velocity here. And we have to now check for the collision. So in order to check for the collision, we have to create another function that is check me. So that should be check enemy and x collision. It should be collisions, and just passed here enemy. So we have to implement this method. So before doing that, we have to now just give the movement in this rect y. So this basically for this up and down movement. So there should be also change in up and down movement, because we can see some of the enemies can arrive from the bricks. So bricks can be at the top and some enemy can arrive from there. So in that position there should be the movement again for this enemy y velocity with an y velocity basically. So it should be not just enemy. Okay, this should be inside this for loop. So next thing what you can do here is we'll just delete that enemy. Let me just delete it. So just pass enemy here. So it can be called enemy with an enemy, and if you go here in this self delete enemy, maybe we have something here. So this function basically takes enemy and it will check for this viewport. So if there is a displacement, basically if there is a change in this position, and if this basically if the enemy is underneath the viewport bottom, it will just make our enemy to kill. And similarly we'll check for the cell slide, and if there's a displacement basically in the viewport right within 500 pixels, then also enemy should be killed. So now next thing what you're going to do is we'll just implement this check enemy x collision here. So let me just copy it and paste it here, and we also have to check here with the y here. So let me just paste it here, and instead of x we have to check for y and just pass here enemy. So in this check enemy x collision, what you have is self, that is a current object, and basically it moves, and this function basically allows enemy collision along the x-axis, and it also remove enemies from the enemy group in order to check against all the enemy that is added it back. So for that we'll just check with this enemy dot kill at first, in order to check for the enemy if we have to kill that enemy. So for that we have to just pass here enemy, and after that what you're gonna do next is we have to make a collider, because there can be a collider within our object, that is main object, our character. So in order to create this collider, we can use this sprite collide any function and just give here enemy, and enemy can also collide with the ground pipe. So that must be ground step pipe group. So just pass here group. So first scan here. So here should be our character and here should be our group. So if it collides with the pipe, there should be the collider, and we'll say enemy collider again here. So next object would be enemy collider, and just to make this enemy collider is something that is used to collide between this enemy and something that is in this group. We just call this enemy group. So what if one enemy collide with another enemy, then what it should be? So let's define it here. So if collider, that means it is just a boolean. So if you see here, this sprite collide any will just pass as a true or a false. So if it collides basically, then it will just pass true. If it doesn't, it will pass false. That means if there is a collision between the enemy and the step pipe, then this collider will be true and this loop will execute. That means we'll just put here something that is the enemy direction. If the enemy direction is default, that means if the enemy, let me say, direction is right, then what you're gonna do is we'll just get the enemy rect right to be the that we have just implemented that before here in this, basically in this mushroom. So we'll just use that same concept here, that is in this rect of right, that is right movement for our enemy should be now collider rect left, because the weight here of the pipe is heavier. So that means now the enemy should move in the direction that should be left. So that should be left, yes. So that means the enemy direction was default right. If it collides with the pipe, then the direction should be left. So in this simple way. So else if, what you're gonna do is to check again if the direction here, let me just say direction, if the direction here is c dot left. So what if our enemy is moving in the left and we encounter this pipe now, and then this enemy direction, that is enemy rect now left, it should be left here because it is just moving in left. That means we just have to use this left. There is no right for this enemy direction because it is moving in the left. So in this rect left, now it should be used as collider dot rect right. And now what you're gonna do is change the enemy position or direction, basically not position, it should be direction to be now right, that is c dot right here, and increase the velocity, or basically there should be the uniform velocity here. Just make the uniform velocity of an enemy to be, let's say, 2. And now we have this X collision. Now it's time to check for the Y collision. Just paste it here. So let me say if we have checked here for the enemy collider. No, we haven't checked. So first we have to check for that. So let me say if enemy collider is true, that means there is a collision between the two enemy. Then what you're gonna do, as before, we'll check for the enemy direction, that is current enemy direction. And if the current enemy direction is right, and get the enemy rect right, because it is moving in the right, there is no left in the rect now. So it should be now enemy collider rect left. Just a sign is left because now it will have to move in the left. So for that we'll just say enemy dot direction should be now c dot right, no, left, because it is moving in the left. So basically it was moving in the right. Now after colliding with another group enemy, it should move now in the left. And now it should be something that is enemy direction, because with colliding this basically with the enemy, we have this enemy collider, that is the group. Basically here it should be the enemy, not collider. So yes, enemy collider, because this enemy collider is basically for this group, that is enemy group. So its direction now should also be changed, because the enemy direction has been now left, and this enemy collider of this enemy group now should have changed this direction, and this direction should be right, because this enemy that was basically one enemy has moved to left. Now the group of enemies should move to the right. So let's assign the velocity to that enemy and enemy collider. That is, first enemy collider should move, that is with a x velocity. Let me say enemy collider and x velocity should be here, that is maybe 2, and basically not, it should be negative of 2, because it had just passed its velocity to enemy. So now enemy should move with velocity 2. So this will be for the enemy collider. So let's check if the enemy direction is basically left. So this is for the right. So let me just copy all of these and make a change if required. So in this direction it should be left, that means default direction of our enemy is left, and we just assign here that is enemy rect left, because it is just moving in left. There shouldn't be right here, and this collider, enemy collider, should have here right, because it is just passing to right, because we have to now move to right, and the collider direction should be now be left, because enemy has already moved to right, and the enemy group should move to left, and there should be now enemy, that is the change in a velocity should be same as before, because there should be the transformation in the velocity from this enemy group to the enemy. So this is basically for our enemy, check enemy in X collision. Now it's time to check enemy in Y collision. So before that, even we haven't add this enemy to the group. So let's do that. So first we have to add this enemy, and this enemy group is a list. So add this enemy to this enemy group, and similarly we'll just make something that is Mario in enemy group, and that should be created before. So let me see, it should be Mario and enemy group, yes. And in this Mario enemy group we should add now this enemy group, self.enemy group. So finally we have completed with this check enemy X collision. It's time for check enemy Y collision, and it will take self, obviously the current enemy, and obviously the current enemy, that is current object and current enemy, and this enemy should be handled same as before. In this X will now handle for the Y. So this will be covered in the next lecture. See you in the next.